we will be looking at, according to your outline, we're looking at successful organization and team building. So far, we would have looked at one, an introduction to the course and an overview. And I told you that in that week, what we did really is look at just how projects operate and the environments that they usually have to operate within, so that we can understand what challenges we might possibly have, and what opportunities the project might have to grow, and to be successful. What can we take advantage of, and what do we kind of have to plan ahead for? Right? We looked at the different constraints that we usually have to deal with projects, right? We don't usually have resources abundantly. We usually have some constraints on what we can use and what we can't use and when we can use those things. And we need to be able to ensure that our project has enough resources to last its entire life up until its successful completion, right? We don't just start projects. We want them to be able to close. Beyond that, last Monday, we would have gone through feasibility and project selection. So that would have covered the major things we need to look at with regards to building and maintaining relationships in our projects, making sure that our projects are successful by first defining what success can generally look like. We look at the different options that we have to carry out whatever goal we have, right? So if you want to market one product, there are multiple ways that you can market that product. So you look at the different options that you have, you do your feasibility studies on each of the options, and then you choose which, or you select which project, rather, using the right terms. We select the project based on the overall standard of how that project will sit next to the vision and mission of your company, right? So we make sure that all of our projects, they push whatever message the company is trying to push as a whole, but we also have to make sure that it's a project that's financially feasible for us to complete. So once we've gotten past recognizing what a project looks like or the environment we're working the project in, and we've also gotten by selecting specifically in which way we will actually complete that project, the next thing we need to look at is the team that we have. And the team building aspect of it is very, very important, because your team makes or breaks the project, right? You can have the most excellent project manager, the one with the highest accreditations, but if the person does not have the people experience to keep the team motivated and to guide them towards successful completion, you might have a system where the project might be going array and getting away from that project manager, or a case where you just have teammates that are unwilling to work because of whatever reasons they have, right? So we need to make sure that our project manager is able to rein persons in and manage their expectations and their motivation within the project. We also need to make sure that we have relationships based around the goal, right? So while we do understand that persons have needs for social life outside of work, we generally try to make sure that everybody on the team understands what we're doing it for, so that we all have the same value mindset as we go through the project, right? We all know what completion looks like. We all know what specific factors need to be completed in order for this project to be successful. And we know which things we can maybe not work so hard on, and which ones we absolutely need to work very, very hard on. How do we know these things? Because as we went through at the beginning of the course, we understand that there are different documents that you have to go through. One of those documents being your work breakdown strategy, that will generally tell you what you need to do. And then based on what you need to do, you can look to see which parts of that network are absolutely necessary, that we call a critical path, right? So when you're being a project manager, or when you are a team generally, we have different ways that we operate when we are on the critical path and a different way that we might operate, or a more flexible way that we might operate if we're off of that critical path, right? But essentially, throughout the project, we really should be working with the mindset that we are going into this. We're going to put our best foot forward. We're going to use our resources as responsibly as we can. And we're going to get this project finished, and we're going to get it finished on time, right? So what factors should we really take into consideration when we're looking at a project manager? Right? What attitudes does a project manager really need? So I'll ask you all. So some of you would have been talking within your groups, and some of you would have elected a project manager. Some of you might not have elected a project manager as yet. But for those of you who have selected somebody as a project manager, can you tell me some of the attitudes or traits you looked for your project manager? All right, so anybody wants to jump in, or you want me to volunteer someone? All right, so
Like your thinking, like your ability to think and make decisions, and your proactiveness.
So you're looking for, you would like a manager that is proactive and that is able to look at the problem from different angles and make the decision that works best for the team and the project.
Just along with other things, but of course, I just stick in those two.
Yeah, definitely. That's great, right? So that's one thing we can look for. We can look for project managers that have sense of responsibility, that have decision-making skills, and somebody that is proactive. Those are excellent traits that we all should want a project manager to have. Anybody else? What else did you look for? What traits and characteristics did you look for in your project manager? All right, Amanda Waterman, Waterton.
Listen to Waterton. Yeah.
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 What did you look for in a project manager?
Yeah. He or she should have the ability to delegate tasks, and also they must be disciplined.
They should be disciplined, right?
Yeah.
So if I were to ask everyone, everybody would generally tell me a lot of the same traits. Like those traits will generally group into a lot of the same groups, but essentially everybody will sort of have a different answer, right? The answer can be based on personal preference. It can be based on your previous experience in a team, right? You can basically want to mimic a team that you have seen be successful before. Um, it can also be a case where the particular item or product that you're working on is something that needs particular experience and expertise. So in a setting where your project is something that's highly specialized, you most likely want a project manager who is specialized, or at least has a technical grasp on what is happening for that project or product, right? So based on different criteria, based on the environment, based on the topic, based on what you're trying to get out of it, those different things will tell you what sort of traits your project manager will need. But holistically, the same leadership traits that you look for in the company in general, those are the same leadership traits we're still looking for now. It just looks a little different. So what exactly is the role of the project manager? Now, when it comes to the project manager, your role really and truly is to coordinate and integrate activities across different functional lines. So what's happening is that you've got the IT function on your team, you've got somebody from accounting on your team, you've got somebody from HR on your team, you've got somebody else from sales on your team. You as a project manager need to be able, to communicate to each one of your team members what is expected of them what is expected to come out of them as a group, how you expect that team to operate with each other, relate to each other, and manage their relationships, right? You need to be able to know who to ask what question to and who to depend on for help at whichever specific point in time you might need help. Because as a project manager, as is it Amanda? Was it Amanda that I asked? Yes, Amanda. Just as Amanda said, delegation is a function of the manager, the project manager, right? So you need to be able to know who to ask what, not favor, but who to put what task on. So as a project manager, when you are elected to run the project, to manage the project at the contract phase, you would have already said specifically what you are going to deliver to the client, right? From that, you would then create your work breakdown structure. And on your work breakdown structure, you will have the different activities that you need to complete. On those activities, the project manager needs to know what resources are needed at what space, right? You need to know, okay, maybe you use your one machine at activity 1, you don't use it for 2, you don't use it for 3, but you need to use it at 4. So you know that activity 1 needs to be completed before activity 4 can even start. Why? Because they both need the same machine. So it's the project manager's job to look at what resources are needed and schedule them throughout the project. The project manager also has to stay ahead of everyone's time. Time management is a very, very important task of the project manager, right? They need to be able to understand what is needed, where the project needs to be every day. They need to be on the checking their Gantt chart every day to make sure that the deliverables for today are delivered. And they need to be able to recognize, oh my, like we might not be able to complete this activity in time. The responsible thing to do here would be to reach out to my client and let them know that we will be a bit late on delivering one specific aspect of this project, right? But it's the project manager's job to be ahead of that and to communicate with whichever stakeholders are needed. So they need to review that stakeholder management plan. Now we would have created in our planning phase. They need to go back to that to know who they need to communicate with at which time and when they need to initiate any sort of change control system, right? So if we plan to do things in one way and you need to change it, you need to know who to ask, who to run the decision of changing something major by, and how to document that change in your project, right? So when we're documenting changes, any major change to your document, to your project, sorry, there's a document system that, a document group that we call our change documents, right? So in there, we would manage any changes that we've made to the scope of the document, because every time you change the scope, you need to have a signature from the client so that when you ask the client to pay at the end of the project, they can't say, oh, I didn't authorize this change. I didn't know this change was happening, right? I didn't authorize for you guys to have additional time. I want it now. And then you'll be able to say, hey, look at my change, check out my change documents. Like here, this was happening and you signed at this point. So it's the project manager's job to know how to relate to not just the team inside, but the team on the outside, their stakeholders. We spoke last week, well, on Monday slightly about your project champion. Your project champion is most likely going to be somebody on the company's executive board or leadership board that acts as a salesman for your project in that team. So there will be meetings with the management team, the executive suite that you will not be allowed into. Your project champion will be the person consistently making sure that the needs of your project are met in those meetings, right? It's their job to continuously sell it to top management. But it's also your job to continuously check in with your project champion to let them know how the project is going along, because you have to remember that their reputation is also on the line if they're going to be backing your project. And if you disappoint them, there's a very small chance that they're going to allow you to work with them again on that, in that capacity, right? So managing that relationship as a project manager, especially a young, well, not young, but a new one, when you're building that first set of experiences, it's very, very important that you try to be as respectful of other people's time and schedule as possible. So making sure that you understand your role as a project manager and that you are on top of all of these things, it gives you an edge when they have another project coming up and they're looking for somebody to manage it for them, right? So all of that to say that the project manager has to manage the project across different functional lines, right? And across different functions too, right? It's not just an internal function. You also manage any clients and so forth that you might have on the outside. You manage those relationships. You also have to sometimes manage your logistics if there isn't somebody dedicated to that. So your project manager needs to be somebody that's a very good communicator. They need to be somebody that has the emotional intelligence to read the room and to read their team. Not saying read in a manipulative way where you're trying to dry and then grind as much as you can out of people. Like you just take all their energy, but you need to be able to manage people and motivate people in a way where you recognize that this person, while their function is IT, they're also really good. They're also really good at a specific maybe product design. You can recognize that they're also good at design. So whenever you have questions on design, you can also seek their expertise there. So even though they're here as maybe they're here as your software interface person, you can also have them just give you their advice on graphic. Why? Because not because you need their expertise specifically, but because it makes them feel like they have some sort of ownership over the project in general, right? And we know that as team members, usually if you feel some sort of connection, whether it's emotional or whatever, to your project, there is that more likelihood that you take it seriously and you do your absolute best, right? When you care about what you're doing, you tend to do it better. So the project manager's job is to make everybody care about the project and to keep everybody caring about the project. Specifically, they need to make sure that they develop a project plan that works for everyone, that they execute that plan in a way that works for everyone, and that whenever changes are necessary, that they get it double checked by everyone that's necessary to double check and sign off on that change. All right. So that is just a general definition of how the project manager's role will go. When you read your textbook, it has basically everything that I just said, but they also go a little bit more into specific inputs that they might have to manage or specific resources. So while I just mentioned resources and I gave you some examples of them maybe having to manage the usage of one machine, your textbook will take you through individuals, like how they would possibly manage the outputs of their projects, services, profits, etc. Right? So the textbook goes into a lot of fine details on those tiny and those smaller parts. But generally, what they need to do is manage all of the resources of your project. What do resources look like? Usually, resources most likely look like capital, so actual money, right? Some sort of fiduciary or currency. You're going to have materials. So materials can be any raw material that has to go into the process. Your equipment, so any sort of machinery or devices that you need to get it done. It's going to be your facility, so your space, your physical space that you can operate inside. Whether you have an accounting business, so your facilities is a literal office building, or if you are a mechanical company where maybe you're making something, we all talk about batter shoebox, right? The facilities there would have been the actual factory. We've got information, so you have to manage how information goes around your project. You have to manage what information is needed to come into your project for successful completion. You have to manage how information is stored in that project and how it can be retrieved both within the project and after. The final thing that you have to manage is personnel. Personnel meaning your people, meaning the skills that you need, meaning the motivation of your team, the energy levels of your team, the time that each team member has. all of these things are resources within the resource of personnel. And in the same way personnel has multiple resources within, everything else will have multiple resources within too. But holistically, it's the project manager's job to have some level of oversight across all of these different resources that have to go into the integration process that will come out as either a product, a service, or profit, actual money again, right? When your input comes on, whatever output comes out is the project manager's job to view that output, double check that output, and make sure that it meets the need of whoever has to collect it at the end. So while the project manager might not be responsible for checking a work in progress item at the end of every single stage, they're most likely going to be in charge of checking that product off at the end of the line. Right? So I will pause here and I will ask my project managers, when it comes to resources, what do you think might be one or two of the most important resources that you will have to manage for whichever projects you have? So I know most of you might not have a specific topic that you have pinned down as yet, but for those of you who have, can I have two project managers just tell me what they think might be the most challenging resource to manage for this course?
Miss budget.
Mm-hmm. Budget. So which parts of your budget?
It's like your opening capital, like I figured.
Mm-hmm. Also getting some opening capital. This project was not supposed to cost you money, right? I hope I hope your project isn't costing you money. Let me know. Let me know at the end of the class if it does, so we can sort that out. But this project really should not. While we will create a fictional budget, you really shouldn't be handling money. Let me just say that right here. Somebody else, what do you think might be a resource that might challenge you to manage? Okay, so Zanel, she raises the point, Zanel raises the point of reliable data. And that is a very good point to bring up. So the thing about data is that it comes in all different forms. Data can sometimes also be nonsensical. You might have to do some processing to that data for it to make sense. Also, data sometimes looks very distorted when you remove it from its context. And in Guyana specifically, we have a historical problem with the management and retrieval of data. Right. So if you're going to run any sort of research project that is Guyana based, you might find yourself in a situation where you're looking for reports or you're looking for studies that you might not be able to find easily. Over time, we have gotten better at managing our archives. The University of Guyana Library, for one, is a really great resource to go find a lot of data in there, or even ask the librarians where you might be able to find the data if there are other buildings or other institutions that have those stats, right? So reliable data is a very, very, very important thing to manage, especially in a setting such as yours, because we know that data is not always reliable, and reliable data is the cornerstone of a successful project. If the data you're working on is faulty, chances are you're most likely going to end up with a faulty product at the end of it. Right? So managing the credibility of your data is very important from the first day. So that's something to just keep track of. And really, it's not addicted to Guyana, it's addicted everywhere. Like data, you have to do a lot of sorting through data regardless of where you get it from. So don't think that it's just a Guyana thing, and if you remove yourself from that setting, it's going to be easier. It's going to be hard everywhere. Retrieving data is always hard. But one important thing is to remember is that we don't have to do it alone. The whole reason that we have project teams is so that you can ask somebody else, where might I be able to find this? Or, hey, I found this data. Can you double check check this for me. Is this true based on your understandings of this topic, right? So even if data doesn't come to you in a reliable form and you don't know how to process it on your own in a reliable form, as a team, we have people that we can depend on. We just depend on somebody else and we see what help we can get on. We move from resource to resource until we find help, but we have to make sure that we're basing our projects on reliable data. So I don't want to get any more into that because I went so far off topic. But yes, those are two excellent points of things to manage. And you also said time, and yes, time is a great resource that we have to manage. And with this project specifically, it's going to be a big thing to manage because we only have 6 weeks in this course and we've already passed 1 week. So yeah, time is something that we all are kind of looking at with like slanted eyes, right? So now that we understand in a general way what helps a project manager to be successful, let's start thinking about what specific things can impact the project manager's role, right? Now, organizations come in different forms, and every organization that you have, even if the hierarchy sort of looks different, you will find differences, whether it's the culture of the organization being different, or the actual organizational hierarchy structure being different, right? So when it comes to organizational structures, we have to look at what is in place that the project manager has to look at from the outside. So it could be something as simple as where the company headquarters is versus where that specific project manager is located. So for instance, if we have a situation where the company is a large one that has lots of smaller subsidiaries, but this one project is one that has to go across the country. So for instance, the headquarters of your company hypothetically is Georgetown, right? But you also have a branch. So let's think about something like Quartz, right? So Quartz has their headquarters, I believe it's still Water Street in Georgetown. Is it Water Main? I think it's Water Street. I think it's Main Street. It's Main Street. Yes, Main Street by Main Big Line, right? Yeah. Santa. Yeah, Water Street is the other one. Yeah, sorry guys. Yeah. So the headquarters is there for Quartz, but Quartz also has locations around the country. So what happens if they're all running the same promotion, right? How do the project managers for that promotion manage it at their individual stores? So whoever is managing the store in Georgetown, they have a little bit of an easier time because the majority of shipments and so forth are most likely going to their store. So if they are running low on one item that is a fast seller, their shipping time to get replacements of that item is going to be shorter than somebody that has a store in Berbice or Essequibo. So if your store is in Essequibo, you have to make sure you keep on top of your inventory counts so that you can make sure that you always have enough product inside the store or product on its way to the store to fulfill your customers' desires. Because if you're running a sale, if that customer leaves, you have a very low chance of that customer coming back. And obviously, you want your sale to be a successful and profitable one, so you want to sell as many of these items as possible, right? So based on where things are located, it might change how the logistics runs from one store to the next, even if it's essentially the same store, same business, same management team, same promotion, right? So the project manager has to look at what specifically is happening at their space to be able to make decisions on that. Something else they can think about. All right, so each store most likely has a store manager, right? That's not the project manager. The project manager is just somebody that comes on whenever they have temporary promotions or whatever to manage. The store manager is somebody that's there on a day-to-day basis, most likely has the highest hierarchy of everybody, the highest status rather of everybody at that one particular store, the highest amount of signing power, I should say, right? So that person's role will look different from one company, from one store to the next, but essentially their job titles and functions really should be the same, but the operations will look slightly different based on where they are. Now, while the job itself looks different for each person is also different. So our 3 managers for the 3 county stores, they have different personalities. One person might be like me. They might be a talker, very friendly. They want to give you long, exorbitant answers for everything that you ask. They want to meet with you, to connect with you on whatever issues you might have. There might be somebody else that's a bit more curt and short-worded, so they're going to tell you exactly what they mean and they're going to get to the point really fast. Then you might have somebody that is somewhere in between the two. So each project manager needs to both understand the functions of the person, so we know that, hey, this person's job requires them to be at the director meeting every Wednesday. So we know that if we have something to sign, we can't come to these 3 persons on a Wednesday. We might also within our teams know that, okay, if you need something to sign, this manager takes their lunch and time at 12. One manager might take their lunch later in the afternoon, right? And then there might be somebody who doesn't take lunch at all. So when somebody takes lunch, it might help you to know when to go with documents to sign, right? Each one of them might come to work at different times based on where they're living. So that would help you to know when, again, you can go to them with documents to sign, or when you can go to them to have discussions on specific topics. So yes, they all have the same meetings, but then they all have different attitudes and different schedules that they have to work with. So each project manager has to learn, understand the team they're working in, and know how to get their projects done, and and to manage the opinions of that store manager at all levels of their project, right? So all of these different factors are things that can impact your project, and the project manager's job is to look at all of them and to continuously make sure that everything falls in line, and if something is not falling in line, that we raise an alarm early enough to the right people so that we can get that fixed. So different things that a project manager might practically have to work with. Think about something like unscheduled changes to the project plan, right? An unpredictable lack of progress, unplanned absence of resources, unplanned breakdown of resources, unplanned loss of resources, or unplanned turnover of personnel. Each project manager will most likely have to look at each one of these things differently based on their individual circumstance, even though they might all have the same problem. So I want to pause here. And I want to ask again if we have any questions from anybody in the class. So I asked a question in class before on what they look for in a team manager, in a project manager. I asked project managers what they think resources might be difficult. For everything I just went through, when it comes to just generally how we manage ourselves in a project, especially as the project manager. I want to ask if there are any questions that you guys might have. We've already been on the call for about an hour. I want to stop here and just get some opinions. So based on everything I just said, did anybody have any questions that they want to ask? Anything they would like me to clarify or give another example of? I got one no. No questions, all good. Wow, you guys really have no questions. I don't even know what to say. Um, okay, so if we don't have any questions, I will assume that you guys are either shy and you're gonna ask me your questions later. And I would hope that that's what you do if you are shy. Or that I'm a really good teacher, or that I've just talked you out so much that you have so much information that you're still kind of trying to process it. So let's go back a bit and let's talk about those organizational structures, right? So when I use organizational structures just now, it was very broad. So let's think about what specifically are things that we think about when we use the words organizational structure. Um, so in your organization, we will have different entities that we have pretty much evolved to deal with different problems. Throughout your project, you might find that environmental factors change. So for instance, currently we see a lot of attention going towards AI, specifically generative AI in the world, in the workplace. There's a lot of buzz happening on it. And one person might understand fully what's happening, somebody else might not, right? On top of that, these definitions have changed a lot throughout time, right? So when I was in high school, I remember I had a teacher that did, like, we started talking about robots, AI. So this would have been somewhere like 2008 when yeah, around then. We had started talking loosely about just AI and where we thought robots would be. We started watching movies and so forth. And these things have changed so much from then to now in the practical way that we use it. So Google, essentially as itself, is sort of an AI service that we've had for a very long time. So what Google has done is basically create a database of all the resources in the world, of a lot of the the written resources and so forth of the world, or on the internet rather. And they allowed you to ask a question. They scanned all of the information out there, and then they returned some suggestions to you and told you to choose which one of these suggestions you want to go with. If you think about it, that is essentially the same thing that generative AI does, right? It answers questions and gives you results. Further, if you ask an additional question or you add extra keywords to what you initially asked, your first prompt, you will find that you have closer answers. So you can ask, what is project management? And you will get an answer. Google will most likely give you a shortened answer paragraph form at the top and then a couple of websites that you can check at the bottom. If you say, what is project management, or what is agile project management, they will read that again and give you a specific response for what is agile project management, right? So what they've been doing is scanning everything and giving us results. Now we have ChatGPT and other generative AI software that we've all been using, that we all have access to free online. And with the abundance of these things, it feels like a lot of people feel like this technology is new. Um, and we might not necessarily understand how to use it, and we are also not really taking the time to stop and learn how to use it. We're kind of just jumping in, skipping the tutorial, and just starting to work and seeing where it goes. And that's great, but it means that we eventually have to build rules and regulations around it and then hope that we continuously catch up to those rules. So what we've seen here is an evolution of technology, right? And that is a very real condition that we usually have to work with on projects. So you might start your project working with Microsoft Dynamics. Halfway into it, something better comes out, or halfway into it, Microsoft Dynamics doesn't work as well as it did anymore, or it doesn't have a function that we need, and we need to switch to something else. Right? So technological revolution is one thing that we generally have to manage when it comes to your organization. So that's one organizational structure. Another one is competition. So all of you would have done marketing, and marketing would have taught you that on your market, you have different types of market, right? We all hope to be working in perfect competition, but we understand that there are lots of monopolies and oligopolies out here that have one or a few major players that manage the price of everything. So if you are a GTT or a Digicel, yes, it would profit you to compete somewhat to gain a loyal company base or client base. So GTT will argue that, hey, we're Guyanese first, right? So support us because we are Guyanese. Support home. Then you might have Digicel saying, we brought you we brought you better rates, we brought you cheaper phones, and they did, right? So that's an argument for them that while we are not Guyanese, we try to make Guyanese life better while GTT was just playing around. So that's gonna be the two of them have their own little campaign going on. And while, yes, we are participating in this, when you step back, you really do recognize that one might be $1,000 and $500 of free services, and one might be $500 and $1,000, like the $1,000, the rest of the resources might not be there. So no, that's a really terrible analogy, but essentially what I'm trying to say is you pretty much are most likely getting very similar packages that are packaged in different colors and just slightly with tiny differences of products. This really isn't a dig to them. It's just how competition works when you only have two major players in the game, right? They can eventually just kind of feed off of each other, and then at worst, they can actually collude. And what collusion does is it pretty much forces monopoly-like characteristics on a different market. So if you've got collusion in an oligopoly, you most likely will kind of feel like you're in a monopoly, right? So competition is something to manage, because if you are in that market where you're doing telecommunications, it's very expensive to enter that market. So if you're entering the market, you want to make sure that you have enough money to manage it properly, to keep your customers, and to make money. And to make money fast, right? Versus if you were to join, let's think of a retail, what can I think of? Clothing. Haven't been home in about a year, but I can pretty much guess that Guyana still has lots of clothing shops on every corner. What happens there is that when you have lots of sellers selling similar products at similar prices, it allows the customer a lot of opportunity to choose, but it also makes the seller not necessarily profitable because they just have too much competition going on. If too many people are in the same market, then the profit has to spread out, and each person will naturally end up getting less. Unless one person has a really, really, really good product and manage to make the service really unique, so they pull a large part of the base. But if you find a market that is heavily saturated, chances are you're going to have very high levels of competition there, and people like the shops will always be trying to outdo each other. There's going to be a promotion every week. They're going to be the nicest and most friendly person to you when you come in the store. They will always have stock ready for you, lots of colors. Whereas if you have two persons, you might get 2 or 3 promotions per year, right? So those things will tell you how the competition of the market is one organizational structure that can govern how your projects will look. So the next one we can look at is the high cost of marketing. So marketing has a lot of value, right? Marketing's value essentially is to be able to connect to the customer and to keep the customer connected. In order for you to bridge connections and to manage connections, it takes time, it takes effort, it takes money. And sometimes it takes a whole lot of patience. Each one of you most likely had friends. Some of you might have friends from nursery school. Some of you might have friends from primary school. Some of you might have only kept up with your friends from high school. Some of you might only be keeping up with the friends that you have in your life right now. The rest of them, if you see them, you might say hi, you might not. Who knows? But previously, before technology became so open and we had things like MySpace, Facebook, High Five, WhatsApp, BBM, before that time, it was a little bit more difficult to get onto your friends. So for instance, let me think about my mom, right? So when she would have gone to school, she would have made her friends, great. But there was no Facebook, so she would not have been able to keep up with them after they would have exited primary school or nursery school or whatever. So she had no way to keep up with them outside of sending letters, and letters is it's very costly. First of all, to post it, well, not very, but it is costly enough for a young person to post letters, especially we're talking about children here, like school-age children making friends. So it would be costly for that person to write letters back and forth to all of their friends. Two, it would take a lot of time also, and when you're a kid, you kind of don't want to waste your time on that. You most likely want to go play, or you have to spend the rest of your time in school. On top of that, like, you know, what was the motivation for doing it? Why are you making it? You've already moved on and made new friends. Why keep holding on to your old friends? So because holding on to friends would have been harder for you back then, you most likely would have let more of your friends go before technology became so widespread. So now that we have all the different social medias, I have been able to keep up with most of my friends throughout my life. Like I have all of my high school friends. A lot of my primary school friends are on my Facebook. I've got all of my friends from university throughout, right? All of the good friends that I've made and my family members that I'm close to, I have access to all of them now. That's not something that was very easily achievable 20 years ago. So now that technology has allowed us to change the way that we manage friendships, we see two different organizational structures coming into play. One, the management of my resources, and two, management of my technology. Now, how does this relate back to marketing, right? So in the same way, marketing, just the same way it would have been hard for me to reach people and for my mom to reach people and keep up with her friends back then, it would have been just as hard for companies to sell their products to you all day, every day. There was no way that courts would be able to send you a notification every single day. They can do that now through your phones, but they couldn't do it then. So the cost of marketing looked very, very different at that point in time. So now that the cost of marketing has changed, it allows us to market a whole lot more and a whole lot more efficiently. However, we're now in a situation where your customers are desensitized to marketing. Why? Because people market everywhere. Every time you open a web page, there is something on the site somebody is trying to sell you. Every page you go, somebody's trying to sell you something. You're talking to your friends on Facebook, somebody's going to jump into the comments trying to sell you something. So because it's become so easy for people to market to you and to reach to you, you've become flooded with things. So now it's, instead of people having to think about marketing in the way that we think of cost traditionally as in money, we now have to think of marketing as in how can we efficiently reach people without annoying them. So the cost of marketing now is a lot of time taken to sit and strategically study how to manage people's emotions, because people generally purchase with emotions. So the cost of marketing was money way back in the day. Now the cost of marketing is really going through all that data and finding the most efficient way to get to everybody at the best possible time. So that's one organizational structure, how we market and the cost of marketing to us. Another structure can be, is the unpredictability of consumer demands. People can love your product today and just never buy it. Why does that happen? It can happen because a lot of times when we start a new business, or we're advertising a new service, I don't know about any of you, but I remember out of high school, I started selling Avon because I loved Avon products for some reason. Not entirely sure why now, but I really did when I was younger. And out of high school, one of the first things I did was start selling Avon. And I would walk with my books all around to all my mom's friends, and I would sell to them. I would sell to all my family members. And I found that after maybe 2-3 campaigns, I did really well, made a good set of money. And then it sort of slowed down, and I sat and I looked at it and I wondered why, right? I tried the same thing again, like campaign 4. I tried to carry the magazines again and try to market to them, but they weren't buying more things. And then I realized that if somebody buys a face cream today, they don't need another one until maybe 3-4 months from now. So then I started to look at what my customers were buying, average how often they might need it, and go to them when I think they're going to need to stock up. So I say, hey, Miss Marcy, I noticed that you purchased this face cream from me in March. I assume that you will need a new jar by June, July. Would you like me to pre-order it for you so that as soon as that next bottle is empty, you're able to move swiftly into the next one? Is that something you're interested in? The person will say yes or no. I have nothing to lose, so I will ask my customer, right? But there's only so much face cream and eyeliners you can push to the same people. So after you've saturated your market, you have to expand your market a little bit more. And then you say, okay, so I can't market to my mom's friends much higher than I am. So what I'm going to do is I'm less shy now. I might market to my own friends. But my friends are like me. They're young, broke. We were just out of school. Can't remember if I had started UG then. I took a year between high school and UG. So I don't think I was at UG maybe when I started. So I was doing ACCA. So at that time, what I would have done is sell to a couple of the people that I met at at CASIC. When that finished, when that market was saturated, by then I had started UG. So then I just randomly started selling to people on UG, and then people would refer me to other people. And I would continue that system where outside of making new customers, I'm also managing the expectation of my current market. And I'm making sure that everybody that needs stocks gets stocks when they need it. So that was a system that I found that worked best for me, and it worked over lots of trial of error. There were lots of no's, not lots of yeses, lots of tears, lots of stress, but I had to adapt every time to meet my customer demand. It was not stable. So in the same way, when you are marketing or you are running your project, the customer demand for that product is essentially going to remain unpredictable all the time. You can hope to look at the current market trends and to guess where it's going to go, but you never really know, right? So I was able to move around my market and make it work. Let's think about something else that was popular that did not work. So a couple years ago, there was this craze on hoverboards. I don't know if you guys remember hoverboards, but hoverboards they move with your mind. For some reason, it took off on a couple markets. It did not take on other markets, and then other cheaper products flooded the market and booted them out. So they were bankrupt really fast. Although the product looked really exciting and there was lots of buzz and lots of people looking to invest in this product. Lots of people still liked it. Not a lot of people bought it. And we see the same thing happening again right now when it comes to VR headsets. Why? Because when you buy a VR headset, you don't need to buy another one for another 5 years. The same thing happens with phones. When you bought a phone previously, the phone would last you a long time and you would keep it. So the very first Nokias, that would happen. So hoverboards, they weren't able to survive because after the initial flunk of the market, too many people flooded, there was too much competition, and they fell off. Fine. When it comes to phones, however, they adapted. They recognized that, okay, we can't survive if people only buy phones every 5 years, right? Those phones are too durable. What are we going to do to make sure that we keep the demand coming? We will make them work 2 years instead. We will put software inside that we will slow down every 2 years to basically frustrate them into buying a new phone. And that's what they did. Don't believe me? Go check the court's ruling on what Apple did, right? So I'm not blasting Apple, by the way. I'm just letting you know that this is a very common market tactic that people use, where if you recognize that your product sometimes is just too good and you're not able to sustain your demand because people just don't have to buy it as often, sometimes they mess with the integrity and quality of their product so that they make sure you buy more. So let's think about fast fashion. Clothing, really expensive. We spent a lot of money on clothing before because we would wear one suit 3, 4, 5 years. Now we wear our things we use it a little while, we have to throw it out. Why? Because we purchase from fast fashion, and fast fashion, it's cheaper, the material is less durable, it doesn't hold dye as well, it doesn't sit on your body quite right after a few washes, and so you have to toss that suit out within a year or two, right? So they've cheapened the product to force you to continuously buy more. You can still go ahead and buy the more expensive ones, but the cheaper ones, for some reason, just appeal to you more because it allows you to have more. Yeah, it just allows you to have more, right? So while it might work for some products, it doesn't work for others. We are still going to purchase fast fashion in 2025. Buying phones every 2 years pretty much stopped about a year or two ago, right? So because now people's financial health is different, people's demand is going to change, we need to recognize that in the same way, your projects will continuously change, and you have to shift your product to meet whatever demand you have. Yeah, it happens regardless of what market you're in, regardless of how ironclad you think your product is, something is going to happen in the demand that you have to find a way to manage. So when it comes to organization structures, these are some of the big ones that we worry about, right? So outside of these, we also have, so those are like four of the most major factors that we usually worry about. And those are the ones that we have been worrying about for a long time. The ones that we now worry about a little bit more is management. So we worry about the technical skills that are within your team, and about whatever requirements you might need on your project. Before, we just kind of hired people and tried to fit everybody into whatever mold we had. Now we try to find things that are more specialized to people's interests and purpose. Another change we've had recently is that we now manage the commitment that people have to their work or their motivation, right? So before, again, we were bending people to the needs of our project. Now we kind of try to see how much we can bend to people wherever we can. We try to make sure that everybody feels motivated and connected to the team and the output. We now, well, I think we've been doing this for a while, but utilizing the talents of specialists. So if your project is in a very, very niche market, it's most likely necessary for you to have somebody on that project at all times that understands the topic. But if it's something that you just kind of want to sell to that market, you don't necessarily have to build a product to the specifications of that market. You can just ask that expert to look at your product at the end and give you their inputs on how you can possibly make it fit into that audience's lifestyle better, right? So you don't have to necessarily, so I feel like specialists was something that was utilized for a long time in the market, but you utilize them in different ways. Sometimes you need a specialist all the time, sometimes you just need them sometimes. Another one is technical groups, like conflict. When it comes to conflict, it is something that we've had for a long time in projects. Well, actually, from the beginning of time, we've had conflict on projects. However, fairly recently, we actually started taking personal conflicts of persons as the company's thing to fix, right? So we're now trying to manage how our employees work with each other from very early on, so that we make sure that those relationships don't get unsavory in the middle of the project. But one of the things that definitely helps with that is giving individual people individual roles, so that we know who at the end of the day is responsible for what. So how responsibility is placed is something that can possibly affect how your project will be run. And beyond that, you have specific time and specifications that each project has to go to. So there might be times where the project manager might think that the project is done, but the client might not agree. The client might want something different, or the subject matter expert that comes in might think they need to spend some more money in a specific aspect, or some more time on a specific aspect of the project. So what happens when the project manager and one of the functional managers or somebody else on the team like really defiantly disagree on how they think something should be handled, right? So these are different things that we need to think about when managing projects. And there are different structures that you generally find in just about every project that you run. So in a more traditional sense, we really just looked at technology, competition, the cost of marketing, as well as the predictability of the demand. But the newer ones, the ones I just listed off, are ones that we really take into consideration now, and we think of those now as organizational structures. It's not that we didn't think about them before, but now we think of them as major things that we need to consider before we start the project. Whereas before, we might have just kind of started the project and then checked to see if we needed it as we went along. So I'm going to stop here again. I did a whole lot of talking just now on organizational structures. And I'm going to stop and ask if anybody has any questions on how they think projects, or how they think you might have to think about projects in the settings of organizational structures. No? Yes? How do we feel? All right. So Celine, you've been with us from the beginning. How do you feel about everything that we've gone through? You're unmuted, but I don't hear anything. All right. So I'm not hearing anything, so I'm gonna go ahead and ask. Oh, I'm still not hearing, like there's no volume coming. Can anybody else hear her? All right. All right, Janelle Cave, you came in a little while ago. I know you weren't here from the very, very beginning, but I think you were here for most of what we went through just now. So given that, you might have missed some of what I said, based on what I have said, how do you feel about what we've covered? Do you understand generally how project managers need to operate within the different organizational structures, or how the project might change across them? Janelle, are you there? Okay, so no answer. Anybody else want to volunteer an answer? Okay, so Celine says that she understands, but you might need some additional reading for it to all come together. No problem. I will check in with you again at the end of today's class, and see if it cleared up anything for you. All right, let me try somebody else. Tiara Small, are you there? Can you unmute? Hey, what is happening? What's happening today? I need some feedback.
So I'm not really gonna talk on a lot of what was taught today. From my understanding, everything is like a chain in comparison for project managers, like how you'd have to have time management, good leadership skills, and designating tasks, based on specialization. Um, yeah, that's just to list a few. And yeah, it's basically like a whole chain link per se.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it pretty much is like a chain because I mean one of the things that we've always been saying, like a saying is the team is only as strong as the weakest link because we have to make sure that everybody is able to fulfill their requirements for us to be able to say that we completed the project in time, right? So yeah, all of these things are connected in some way, shape, or form. And generally, we have to, as project managers specifically, we have to be able to have the ability to manage all of them at the same time, right? Or at least know where to go to get answers about everything at the same time. So there are two major types of project management that I do need to go over with you. So the major one that we usually use is traditional project management. And what traditional project management does is that it allows you to um all right. So in classical project management, generally what we do is we have one project that we want to do, we have one basic timeline that we want to follow through, and the project builds on each other as we go along. So think of traditional project management like we're building a car and we're double checking everything when we get to the end of it, right? We double, triple check everything when the car is at the end. That's when we take it for a test run. So we're going through each part, we're adding a different item to the car, and at the end of it, we have one full car. With agile project management, what we're doing is we're testing it at every individual milestone. So let's think about it like think of it like we're starting a new business and we want to make fruit juices, right? That's our business. Our project is to make fruit juices. So you have 5 juices you want to make. You want to make passion fruit, you want to make cherry, you want to make plum, you want to do one that, well, I mean, Mauby isn't a fruit, but I like Mauby. So you're making a Mauby also, and maybe you've got some coconut water, right? So 5 different drinks you're making. And what you're going to do is you're going to run making the different batches, the 5 different batches are going to basically function as their own individual projects because they all have different ingredients and procedures to work through. So you're going to make the first set, you're going to say, okay, we finished that part of the order. You make the second juice, you say, oh, we finished that one. The third juice, we finished that one. The fourth one, we finished that one. And the fifth one, we finished that one. So we do them all individually and we check that we finish each one and we put it aside at the end of each node, or we call them iterations, right? Whereas with project management, you assemble everything throughout the line, and then at the end of it, we say, okay, great, we've got a finished product. We double check it against the specifications that we were given. We make sure that it fits, and once it fits, great, we move on, right? So that's the two general ways that we've done project management. And the first one, which is where we do everything and then we double check everything at the end, is traditionally how we have done project management for a long, long time. In the same way, when it comes to how we manage organizations in the company, we have the traditional management styles, which generally has your executive office at the very top. Below your executive office, you have your division offices, which has, you might have engineering as one division, operations, you might have HR as one, admin can be another one, finance can be another division. So you've got the executives at the top, then you've got your division heads just below there. Within each one of those divisions, you probably also have a manager, right? And maybe multiple departments under each one. So for instance, in engineering, you might need somebody for mechanical engineering and somebody else for electrical engineering, what was I saying? And somebody else for civil management of the plant. Right, so under each division, you can also have multiple departments. And so what you're doing there is you're basically building a hierarchy structure that goes, that has a bunch of different departments that are functional and technical, and they all come together essentially to form the one big company. When we're talking about organizational management styles, that's generally how we're looking at it. right? How is your organizational structured? How does authority flow? Where does information go? Is your company one where we listen to our employees, and so information flows from the bottom of the graph up to the top, and so the employees at the top just listen to what everybody else has to say at the bottom and then builds their goals based on that? Or is it one where at the top they set the goals, they set the standard and the expectation, and just instruct everybody at the bottom? Right? So your organizational structure, it really refers to, one, the physical structure of that organizational chart that you have created in your company, and two, the management style of the people within that company and how information flows throughout the company. And how these things operate in the company will directly influence how it impacts your project, right? So I think we have gone through the organization and how the organization specifically affects the project. There is lots more you can talk about organizations inside, but I'm not going to go through any more of those because I will just continue to bore you. I want to move on to the concepts of more team building now. Team building is really important to just how we manage people, and really important to this course in general. And I think it's just one of the most important skills right now, remembering that everybody is human. So we find generally successful organizations, you can find that up in chapter 2 and 3. The information is pretty much scattered across like the first 3 chapters, but when we're going specifically into, the first 3 chapters pretty much covers the first 2 weeks of stuff, as well as successful organizations. And then for team building, you find most of it in chapter 4. So for team building, the first thing you would obviously need to consider in building a team is, what is the purpose? Okay, you're building a team for this specific project. Is this a project office that you're building where these people will run projects for the company forever? Or are you pulling people off of their day-to-day work, their functional teams, to work on this project for you? It will decide how you pick people. If you have to work with people for a shorter time, you might not take into consideration deeper interpersonal issues that might happen within your team. If you know that, hey, we're just working for a short time on this project and then we're disbanding, right? You're going to tend to choose your team members differently. If you are building a project office where we have to work together all the time, you want to look at those interpersonal issues a tiny bit more. Not to say that you're not going to hire somebody just because they don't get along with somebody else. It's just to say that you might consider it and have some sort of conversation with both members separately at the beginning to let them know, hey, I don't want negative energy here on the project. Let's see what we can talk about and discuss amongst with each other to manage as the team leader and the team member before conflict ensues. Like, before anything happens, I want to pull you aside and let's have a chat on, how you feel about working with this individual, because I know you guys have a history of conflict. It might be an uncomfortable conversation, but if you're going to be if you're building this team for them to work together for a long period of time, you need to be able to address those things head on with compassion and empathy. So the staffing environment is one thing that will tell you how you need to choose people. It's going to be based on the culture of the organization. It's going to be based on the customers. If the customer likes a specific customer service rep, definitely have that person on your team, right? If the customer has one specific person that always manages their IT issues when they call into the call center when they have an issue, you definitely want to have that person on your team so they can give you insight into what issues the customer might have been having on a long-term basis, what things you can, bring about to soften any issues you might find coming up in the project. You want to have people who understand the client or the customer, right? You want to understand what direction the project is going in. You want all of your team members also to be involved in the planning of your project, to feel like they have some sort of control and ownership over the project, where they can say, hey, I noticed that we might not be going in the right way for this, or I noticed you have this down as the task for me to complete this activity, but I actually think that I have a way that we've done this before on a different project that might be more successful. Let's look at, and then the project manager can say, thanks for that insight. Let's look at that and see, what are you talking about? Like, you've done this before on a project. Like, let's see the lessons learned from that project and see if we can implement it here to make this one better, right? So if you make your team feel like they're part of the planning, they will most likely come with you to help with the controlling of the project. And if you get help with the control, it becomes that much easier for you to evaluate, because if you've had your team working together to control the different aspects of the project, it makes more sense that by the evaluation point, everybody should have already evaluated tiny issues in the control, that they know that, hey, when we're evaluating, we're looking for these 5 issues that we were having issues with throughout. Let's see how it runs on this test run. You test run it, it runs really, really smoothly. Now you can start your project reporting and say, hey, we have completed all of the deliverables of this project. We are ready to deliver to the client. We are 100% confident with our output, right? So these things, while they really are things that are owned by the project manager, they are things that are also owned and should be embraced by the entirety of the team, right? The project manager is not the only person on the team. The other things that we look at when we're working with teams is just the influence of that project manager. If your project manager is somebody who is honest and has integrity, the team will tend to also be honest and have integrity. Why? Because they understand how they need to come to this project manager with information. They have to understand that if this person wants to be honest and reliable every single time they give information, you have to supply them with reliable data, right? And if the data you bring them is not reliable, you most likely will have a problem with that person that you will now have to fix later on. So why not just be honest and have integrity at the beginning? Understanding personal problems is something that not just the team leader, but also team members need to have, because obviously when we have a problem within between each other, we're most likely gonna know before the project manager. Manage that. If you see 2 people throwing subs at one another, maybe pull aside the one that you're closer to and say, yo, go to the project manager and sort this out, or find a different way to deal with this person. Like, we don't need to be aggressive and make things worse than they are, right? Projects are already difficult to work on. Understanding the technology that we need, while it might be beneficial to have one person that is an expert on a specific piece of tech on our project, it is definitely also valuable if we have multiple people that understand that technology. Why? Because if that one person is unwell, or they move on to a different project or a different company, how do we complete the project if we have no concept of how to work that technology without them? And worst of all, how do we double check their work to ensure that they've done their work correctly if we don't understand what they were supposed to do, or how they are supposed to do it, or how the tools deliver the responses to them? We have to make sure that we are compliant. Yes, the project manager is very much the person that's going to get in trouble if compliance is not there, or if a specific competency is needed. For instance, if somebody needs to interpret something legal for the project, maybe it could be a violation of what do you call that? Employee health and safety, like a health and safety violation. If we see something like that coming up, the project manager will most likely be the person that's going to be called to look at that. However, everybody generally needs to make sure that they're safe. And if you see somebody doing something unsafe, you generally you should tell them. And if they don't listen, tell your project manager, right? But compliance is one thing we need to look at, but also the competency of people, right? Our management principles. We would have done business theory, you guys would have done business theory in your first year. For all of you business students, you would have done business theory in your first year. And in there, we would have understood the basic principles of management and how management generally is done. And one of the big pillars in our management principles is how we communicate, right? So in communicating, it isn't just what you say, it's also how you say it, and it's also who you say it to. Because we understand a big part of communication, right, is how that person will interpret it. It's not just what you say, it's how they hear it. And if you are saying it in a way that is disrespectful to their value system and their culture, they're most likely not going to be ready to receive your message. So how we communicate based on people's culture and people's lived experiences is very important. Beyond that, we have to some more characteristics that you can look at for good project managers. Well, other characteristics that project managers might look at when assembling team might be the alertness and quickness of somebody, might be their versatility, the energy, could be their toughness, decision-making ability, or their problem-solving skills, as well as their own ability to evaluate risk and uncertainty. Now, when it comes to risk and uncertainty, that is inherently something that the project manager needs to manage. However, it's also something that the project manager will expect each person on a task to be able to manage. Why? Because if you are working with a resource that is very, very expensive, the project manager will want to know that you understand the risks involved with creating draft one, and they would expect you to create draft one very, very carefully if the product you're crafting draft one with is expensive. If it's something that's cheap and easily replaceable, like maybe you're just doing a drawing on Microsoft Draw or on AutoCAD, sure, you can go ahead and have 5 different drafts. But if we are building something that you have to pay for each design or each mockup, then the project manager will most likely expect you to be a bit more careful with the way that you use your resource, right? So these are different things that the project manager will look for on the team. But it's also something that your team members will be looking for across people, right? So if there's something that is not available to the project manager, they can do additional things like possibly like for instance, if there is a specific skill that you need that nobody has, you look for somebody who has the closest possible skill and you say, hey, like we need the skill on the team and we have a training that we would like you to do. Would you like to do it? Especially if it's something that has cost. The project manager should be the person to go about and say, listen, if we need that person to learn that skill and there is a cost, by rights, the organization should look for a way to support that employee by paying for that qualification for them to get it. Or the project manager can look for a free resource that teaches them that skill and also give them the time off to do it. So they can support you by paying for it or support you by giving you time. The organization can also choose to do neither. However, it will really be dependent on the type of organization and the way the project manager is able to advocate for their team. The next thing they generally look at is the project manager. When it comes to staffing, we really want to provide good working environments for everybody. We want everybody to be comfortable. So we, it can be something as simple as having warmer tones on the wall so that nobody's eyes burn. But it can also be something like putting people that are maybe friendly with each other or have similar interests or are working together on the majority of tasks together, putting them to sit near to each other so that it's more comfortable for them to navigate the office. When it comes to making sure that resources are applied effectively in each part of the project, it is sure, the project management has a lot of responsibility there, but the project manager usually delegates that responsibility to whoever is managing that specific activity, because you would expect the person managing the activity to understand the resources that are needed and how to apply those resources in a way that is not wasteful. Yeah. So while selecting your your project manager is essentially an executive decision. Like the executives are usually the persons who will go through everything that they need and know who to select based on what is both legally needed by the company as well as what is preferred by the team. While the company will look at that, they will also pretty much look for they're not looking for the rest of the team members usually. Usually the project manager has the ability to choose their team or has some oversight over how their team is chosen. So choosing the rest of the team is more likely going to be a decision that's not at the executive level. It's probably going to be at the functional managers level. The functional managers will be able to say who has the time to support the project as well as who has their knowledge and the network needed to supply that project with whatever is needed from their specific department. I hope that makes sense. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, I can give you guys an example. But when we moving on, the next thing that I do want to look at is looking at these skill requirements that are needed for managers, right? So when we're looking at skills, the things that we generally look at is which people need to be managed, right? Or which people we have, which tasks need to be done, and what tools we have available to do them, what the organizational structure looks like, and what the environment looks like. Based on those, it tells us what skills we will need. Now, when it comes to the team in general, the project manager needs team skills of team building. They need leadership, they need conflict resolution, technical expertise, planning, organization, entrepreneurship. They need administrative skills. They need management support. They need resource allocation skills. Those are the ones that are here in your textbook. If we talk about resource allocation, we're basically talking about budgeting, and delegating. When we're talking about management support, again, we're talking about delegating, but we're also talking about their negotiation skills. When we talk about administration, we're talking about document management and retrieval. We're also talking about making sure that we know which documents need to be prepared and how those documents need to be prepared. When we talk about entrepreneurship, we don't expect the project manager or the project or program manager to go ahead and start their own company from the project, but we need them to have the initiative that an entrepreneur usually has to look at different problems and come up with plausible and feasible solutions to that problem, right? So as you look at the textbook has all the different skills. They don't really go into them in details, but you can Google those all separately. When it comes, yeah, so the textbook, actually, now that I look at it, the textbook does go through each one of these skills one by one. I've already gone through just, speaking about them in general, so I'm not going to, but specific breakdowns are there in your textbook, page 152 to 153, right? Then, in some special cases, when it comes to project manager selection, we need to think about which assignments are full-time versus which ones are part-time. We look at if we have several projects that need to be assigned to the project manager, that means that we most likely have somebody that is dedicated to working projects, versus if we generally just give different people projects and don't assign somebody to a project management office. Further, if we're going to do that, we will most likely end up in a situation where we have different functional managers that have different projects, right? And then those functional managers are going to have to find ways to work around each other to borrow each other's resources. That is their people as well as their machines or infrastructure or information rather that the different managers have. Yeah, and then the last thing to consider in a special case would be the project manager's role in relation to the general manager. So if it's a small company, you might find situations where the project manager's role kind of conflicts with the general manager's role, but that is something that the team will have to speak openly about at the beginning of time to know how to manage. So in any special case, it most likely will be recognized before the project is planned, like it will be recognized at the initiation phase. So at that phase, we usually answer these sort of questions. Yes, I'm just gonna skip past the next couple pages. And we're going towards specific human factors. All right. So on page 159, I hope you guys are taking notes. Like I told you guys on the first day, you need to be taking notes and writing things down. So on page 159, I see a really good breakdown here of the duties and job descriptions of the team at all different phases of the project. Now, I'm not going to go through that with you in class because we will go through them as we go through, as we continuously go through this, but there is a really good summary here on page 159. Then beyond that, you've got all of your duties. Yeah, this is essentially an example of what one looks like. Then you've got your project management positions and responsibilities. I'm not going to go through those because they will be dependent on the organization and who we're talking about. So for instance, some positions they've noted are project management coordinator. You have like your program manager, you have your project manager, and what they do is they group the typical responsibilities as well as skill requirements for each of those people here. So I think that's a really good resource to look at. It's on page 162. Yeah. I'm going past the information on the project office. It's located on page 169. It's just called the project office. It's page 4.9. I've taken you through that already. When it comes to the project office, it just generally means that we have one dedicated spot where we keep everything related to projects for the entire company in one spot. It's usually most likely going to be utilized if we have a lot of projects happening at the company. And also if we usually mostly find it accompanied by the company having a project manager that stays on all different projects and manages them across. So some companies might have something they call, they usually just call them the project managers, right? Or a program manager. So a program manager would be a person that has multiple projects making up one program. So for instance, in that example we had before with Quartz might have a project or program office at the headquarters. No, it's just going to be called a project office. It's a program manager. Yeah. So if they have a program manager, then that program manager is most likely going to be in the project management office in the headquarters, right? That program manager will have 3 direct reports, which are each of the project managers on the 3 different branches. And the program manager is, while they are running this promotion, this sale, they are also trusting their project managers to manage how the sale runs on each of those different branches. But all 3 projects basically make up one program, which is this promotional program that we have going on. So I hope you understand how the hierarchy runs, but basically we just have a program that is made up of multiple projects. That's it. Regardless of wherever you see those words intertwined, once you see program, understand that the program manager has multiple projects, right? If we see project, a project is a project. Where we see program, we understand program is multiple projects. Yeah, so there's also a good lineup here of how the project office would look, where we have the one project manager, and then we've got the smaller assistant project managers inside if we don't have our program manager in front. Yeah. While I am teaching from your main textbook, I also read the other textbook, and then I incorporate all of this with knowledge that I have from before project management to just kind of give you, you know, from my experience, what exactly it is we're trying to do here. So when you look at the course outline, like the course content specifically, I just want to let you guys know that those were the ones that were generated straight from UG. So when you see me trying to go directly according to these topics, I'm just really trying to make sure that we fulfill all of the things here that UG wants you to learn, but I'm pretty much testing you on the things that I go into detail on, right? But everything is here for you. So the next thing we need to look at is I just want to review generally how we manage the project team. And I want to do that this time directly from the textbook because I did it just now kind of more off my head. And with my own notes, like the notes I took for class today. So I want to just kind of go directly according to what the textbook had. Yeah. So when you look at the textbook, there's specifically a whole area that deals with the formation of teams. And there's a whole area that deals with generally the project manager, right? So project management office and project manager stuff specifically. We talk about that in chapter 4, right? So in chapter 4, we go through, the special cases. I did mention that, but we also deal with what happens if you select the wrong project manager, right? And they also have some tips in there for next generation project manager. But what I especially like about this textbook that we're using, somebody's asking, oh my God, I am so sorry. I did not check. Let me go. No, I don't see anybody here in the waiting room. Nobody's in the waiting room, at least not right now. I'll keep an eye out though. Yeah, so in chapter 4, they do give some tips for next gen project managers, but what I especially like, she was already accepted. Yeah, great. Yeah, but what I especially like is that at the end of each chapter, there is a guide on study tips for project management or PMI project management certification. Now, a few of you have reached out to me about that. So what PMI is the Project Management Institute, and the Project Management Institute is a nationwide network of project managers that have come together to formalize project management. So that would have been formed years ago. And then their theories, so they would have formed based on the theories that were written. So, I mean, people have been writing on project management, how to manage teams, how to manage people, like just the area of management in general, the philosophy around it has been around for a while. So what we've done is we aren't trying to reinvent the wheel and make up stuff. We are working with historical text and developing on that over time. So a lot of what you will see in the text about project management specifically would have been concepts that we have generated for a long time that we're only now really putting together in the context of treating project management as its own industry simply because organizations are using them more and more. When organizations were using them maybe once or twice a year to run a specific project that they have outside of like marketing that runs them often. Like if it was a regular office, you probably wouldn't have had them coming up that much, maybe 5 years ago. Now we have lots of projects always coming up, and a lot of times we utilize people from different departments. So because of how business has evolved, our acceptance or our appetite for projects has also evolved, which forces us now to build all these structures around it. So the organization that manages those structures is the PMI organization. Their headquarters, I believe, is in the US. Don't quote me on that because they're also like they have offices in multiple countries. But one of the great things that they do is they allow you to volunteer remotely or work remotely on different projects that people might have. A lot of times you find project managers. So like Project Management Institute specifically has like smaller subsets. So for instance, if there was an institute in Guyana, there would have had an office in Guyana and people at that office. And so they would be the people kind of managing the project managers within Guyana. right? So if you have a question on what to do, how to retrieve something, lessons learned, you're looking for the format of a specific project management document, you can find it directly on the project management website. But if you had project management office from PMI in your country, you can go to that office to get help with doing specific things on projects. The other great thing that they do is provide a certification that is recognized around the world. So if you're planning to move or something, you were looking to get into project management as your official work title, like that's what you want to do for a long time, you want to work on short projects, or you want to work on projects within companies, you can go ahead and get that certification. You just sign up for it online, and I have everybody has like management codes that we can, membership codes that we can give to other people so that they can get discounts on writing that exam, which is why I mentioned it, so that I can give you my code so that you can get a discount on writing it if you intend to do it. The thing about it is somebody asked for someone out of the course. Now, for you to qualify to write the to write the PMI, the CAPM or PMP. So CAPM is the certificate for project management, and the PMP is the project management professionals accreditation, like it's higher. For you to be eligible to write the exam to do either one of them, you need to have a professional say that you have completed the amount of course hours necessary for you to do it. So the test is actually, it's not very difficult, but it's difficult enough, right? You need to understand the theory in order to qualify for the exam. And by you doing this course at UG as students of the University of Guyana, you are eligible to use the hours from this course in order to do that certification. All you have to tell them is you did a project management course at UG. We were in class for 8 hours a week times 6, and that number is the amount of hours that you have to qualify you for that exam. And that would definitely allow you to be able to write that exam. So I can just sign off and say that if they decide to audit you. They don't audit everybody that registers to write it, but if I'm going to if you're going to write it, and you're going to say that I am your instructor, because you do have to say who your instructor was, I do need to know that you're going to put me down there. So like, you don't have to pay me anything at all. Anything you pay is going to be to the PMI website, and it's going to be directly for that accreditation. If you're interested in it, look into it a bit more, let me know. Yeah, for those of you who definitely want to do it at the end of this course, I'm not going to bother you with that for now. Whatever we do in this course, you definitely need all of that knowledge. But if you decide to do the certification exam at the end of it, let me know, and I can give you additional help to get you through the actual exam, because the exam has, well, it's a little bit more difficult than what my exam is going to look like, right? All right, so now that we've gotten past that, let me know about it. But I wanted to stop and tell you about that because I did make a note that this textbook has study tips for each of the chapters at the end of the chapter, right? So the chapter dealing with the responsibilities and the role of a project manager is chapter 4. What we're moving on to right now is chapter 5, which generally takes us across the different management functions that we have within teams, right? So we've got to control our team, that is measuring to make sure that we look at our reports and where we estimate that we would be, that we actually are that place. So we're measuring, we're evaluating to make sure we're at the right place, and we're correcting if we're not at the favorable place that we need to be. Beyond that, we will also be directing. In the directing part of what the project manager does, they generally look at staffing, they look at training people as they need to be, they look at supervising, delegating, as well as motivating, right? So those are some of the, so motivating, then we have counseling and coordinating. Those are also direct roles that the project manager has to take. When it comes to directing projects, beyond that, when it comes to your project, we have to manage the psychology of the people working on our team. That is basically managing, when you're managing their motivation, supporting them, delegating to them, and all of this, we also need to manage that they are where they need to be psychologically, because if they aren't okay, they might not be okay to work, right? So we want to first make sure that our employees are okay. And then we want to make sure that they have all of the tools that they need to be successful at whatever task we give them. So this is where we start thinking about the needs of our employees. And when we're working on a team, they aren't really considered your employees. They are more your peers. And so in that case, we call them peers or your teammates. So one of the theories you also would have done, I believe, I'm pretty sure it would have been in management theory, you would have gone through Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it's one of my favorite theories because I truly believe that everybody has needs. And if we are able to quantify or section our needs, we're able to understand how we feel on a day-to-day basis, right? So on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the first need at the bottom of the pyramid is your psychological needs. And your psychological, I'm going to say psychological, your sociological needs. Your sociological needs are your need for food, right? Your need for shelter, right? From different patterns of weather. The needs that the things that you need to absolutely live. Like without food, water, shelter, you can't live. You can't live a comfortable life. Like even if you have some other things, if you don't have food, you're not going to be comfortable, right? So your psychological needs are the physiological needs, are the ones that you absolutely need in order to survive, your most physical needs, right? Beyond that, you have your needs for safety. So your need to feel safe within the space that you operate. Beyond that, you've got your social and belonging, your needs for social life and belonging to whatever space. So while safety is okay, we feel safe within our home. We don't feel like anybody's gonna break in. We're able to close our eyes and sleep comfortably. Your social needs allows you to feel safe within the people in that house also, right? You feel like you love your family members, even if you might fight, you generally love them. You feel like you belong to this family. If somebody asks you, who are you? Or, where do you come from? You have an answer. I come from Buxton, right? Regardless of where I go in the world, I always feel like I belong to Buxton. I always go home, check my family out, check out the animals, hang out with the friends I grew up with. Like regardless of whenever I'm home, if it's for 1 or 2 days, I always go to Buxton and check out my people up there, right? So your belonging needs, your social needs are the people who you choose to be around with and the people you also feel safe with, right? So safety is feeling safe within your own space. And when it comes to your social and your need for belonging, it's the spaces that you don't own or govern, but you still feel safe within them. Beyond that, you have your need for healthy self-esteem. You have your need for healthy boundary setting with people. You have your need for healthy self-expression and self-confidence, right? So if you feel like you are doing the best that you can and you genuinely believe that whatever output you put out is the best you could have produced, and you are confident in the results you put out, you have once you feel that way, you have fulfilled your need for self-esteem, which is our need number 4. Your need, the highest need and the one that's most difficult to achieve, is your need for self-actualization. And self-actualization, we might think of it as in different ways. We might think of it as a religious awakening. You might think of it as a spiritual awakening. Whichever way you go, self-actualization, what it allows is for you to feel like you have purpose. Regardless of all of these things, if you don't feel like your purpose is done or you genuinely did the best you can today, and you don't feel like when you close your eyes, you don't feel comfortable with everything that happened today, you don't feel like you did the best you can, even if you got whatever you needed to do right, you don't feel like you did the best you can, you don't feel like you actualized your actual potential, you might not feel that comfortable sleeping that night. You might be comfortable enough to sleep, but you mightn't be the most comfortable. right? So while we do have those 5 different needs, some graphs will show you 7. I'm going to use the 5 in this textbook. While you do have those needs, and you know, even if you have the first 2 needs, you're still a very fortunate person. We still need to recognize that a lot of people want to achieve all of them. And so when you're looking at your team, when you're looking at your teammates and you see somebody might be feeling off, look to see which one of their needs might not be met, right? They might be feeling like the profession that they're in, they might feel a bit trapped in there. They want some more space. They might not feel like they're able to express themselves in the organization. It could be because of the organizational culture. It could be that they just have an off day today, right? The other needs, those are a bit more easy to identify because they're a bit more physical, but the first 3 are very, very, very mental, and they will generally show up in the motivation, the initiative, and the spirit of your team, right? Safety, if somebody doesn't have somewhere to live, you're kind of going to see the signs. If you don't feel like there's, you know, they don't feel safe in wherever they are, they're generally going to come to you with that information, or you're going to see signs that they're not in a safe space. And then with the psychological needs, if somebody is hungry, while they might not want to tell you, I would suggest that you do things like monitor people's lunch breaks. And you're not monitoring it in a way where you're saying, oh, you went to the bathroom for 15 minutes. Where were you? You're monitoring it in a way where you need to make sure that people are eating at work. If they're at work for 8 hours and you have not seen them eat, go make a casual conversation. Go suggest that maybe you order in some sandwiches or something, or you make conversation like that around it. Maybe they might feel comfortable telling you, maybe they might not. But if I see one of my team members not eating consistently for a little while, and I might know that, you know, they might have had existing financial issues, I'm not even asking the question. I'm buying lunch. Like, guys, I'm bringing pizza in today. If it's a small group, let's have some pizza, so that you make sure that, you know, at least their psychological needs are met until they feel comfortable enough, sociological, sorry, until they feel comfortable enough to come and talk to you about it. So this is why it's so important for you to set the stage very early in the project that we are a team, and that we are looking out for each other. But obviously, people are adults. You can only help people as far as they want to access your help. But I do mention it because Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it does give you a good layout to kind of look to see where issues might be with persons, to know if it's an issue with motivation that you can fix within the team, or if it's an issue with motivation outside, the outside factors that you kind of just need to talk with them a little bit more about and see if they open up to you, or you just leave it alone. Yeah. So yeah, that's generally one of the things we need to look at when we're dealing with people. Now, things that might generally affect those would be frustration. So maybe the team is working for a long time on one particular issue or one particular bug on the program, and you aren't able to find what the bottleneck is. People might become frustrated. So manage frustration, because you will also be feeling it. So if you feel it, they feel it. Manage it. Psychological failure. If you feel like you're trying this thing over and over and over and it's not working, the same with frustration, the same with failure. That resentment kind of builds up inside, and you need to manage that as a team, right? Maybe if you tried it 7 times, you're already working late, maybe stop, maybe go home, take a nap, come back tomorrow and see if anybody slept and dreamt of the answer to the question, right? When it comes to short-term perspectives, there are times where individuals might not necessarily understand why they're doing what they're doing. And if they don't understand why they're doing it, you're probably going to have a situation where they're looking to just fulfill their requirement in the short term. They might not be thinking about the long-term impact of that shortcut that they might take. So with short-term perspectives, if you do notice an employee behaving in that manner where they're kind of shortcutting things, the things that they output, you kind of have to retouch it all the time. You stop and have a conversation about what the bigger picture is. You remind them that, listen, when you finish your work, it's work in progress and the next team needs to pick it up. Let's try to make sure that, you know, you cross all your T's, you dot all your I's before you pass your work over to somebody else. Another one that we generally need to manage is conflict. Now, I'm not going to go into conflict anymore because I feel like I've done conflict a lot, but conflict, we need to manage it from the first day. See how people are acting amongst each other. If we notice issues, we try to talk about them very early. We have lighthearted conversations about it at first. We're not calling anybody out. You're not shaming anyone. You are trying to bridge the topic in a softer manner, in a way that helps the entire team if it's something that is already leaked out in the team. If it's just something you notice between two people and it hasn't leaked out to the team, deal with the two people separately. If it's something you need to have a conversation between the two of them, pull them aside, have a conversation separately, tell them you're going to have one together and then have one together. Don't just take two feuding people, dump them in a room and expect it to go well. Doesn't go well the majority of the times unless you have a conversation beforehand to set expectations of respect with each person. Get each side separately before you bring them together to get the truth. Understand both sides, both perspectives, and then get the truth. Or rather, that's just that is my approach to conflict management. But when you read the textbook, you'll see lots of different approaches to conflict management or conflict in general. So project managers must motivate temporarily assigned individuals by appealing to their desires to fulfill the lowest two levels. Why? Because if the team is a temporary team, it means that you are not going to be working with them in the most times long enough for you to really understand if they need purpose, right? The short time that you're working with them, they're probably going to be able to put aside their whatever issues they might have to just get the work done. But even if you're on a short team, those first two needs will start affecting that person. So even on a short team, you're going to recognize the first two. So that's why they're saying that when you're looking to work with a temporary team, very early on, you need to manage the two lower tiers of the pyramid. That would be things like feeling pride about the work that we're doing, feeling security in the opportunity that they really will get credit for the work that they've done, that if they meet the requirements, it's definitely going to be approved. So if you make the requirements very plain to them from the beginning, it means that they have a higher chance of being approved and therefore they will be more motivated. Security of advancement, if it's possible. So if it's something you can say to, listen, if you do really well on this project, or I've noticed you doing really well on this project and take an initiative, if we continue like this, I might work with you for a project that I have upcoming next week, right? Especially if these are projects that you're doing on the side for additional income, right? So if you see somebody working really well, you can motivate them with securities of advancement, also securities of promotion. So you can tell them, listen, you're doing really well, and I actually want to put your work forward for a possible promotion to your manager. You let their functional manager know that they worked really well in whatever capacity, and maybe they can, take on some additional functions at their job if that is something that the employee wants. Don't give people additional responsibility if you haven't asked them for permission first. But with promises of promotion, you have to be careful that you are, one, their functional manager, or two, you have influence over their functional manager. Don't make promises that you can't keep, right? Also security of recognition that, if you do really well in this project, everybody on the team will be recognized for their effort. It's not just the team is successful, the project manager collects the award, the entire company sees that one person and thinks, oh, this person is responsible for the entire thing. It's very important for a project manager to be humble enough to understand that they are nothing without their team, right? So security of recognition, that everybody feel recognized for the work that they have done. And then the last one is means for doing a better job, and not just keeping a job. So look for persons who want to consistently do better, people who are improving, asking for questions, and then even further, you have somebody that did some work for you, you gave them pointers on how to do better, and the very next time they submitted work, you've noticed them putting those pointers into action. Definitely let them know that, hey, I see you took my notes into consideration. Thank you so much for that. Let them know, right? Don't just appreciate it and smile. Let them know directly at the end of it. Pull them aside and say, hey, thank you so much for that. Like, I feel seeing that you took my note into consideration. And I'm very impressed that you were able to execute it so fast. something like that can possibly make that person's day and really make them want to see you even move forward in the company in the future, right? So we're building healthy relationships at work. The next thing we need to look at are professional needs that people would have. So based on persons' personalities, when you get to know them, you will understand the differences in personalities and the differences in how those personalities clash with their work, right? And it will also, personalities will also show you how they will clash within the team. So some persons like more interested in challenging work, whereas some persons might prefer to do something similar over and over and get really good at it. Some persons might want to do work that is professionally stimulating or something that puts them on the forefront of the executive's mind. Maybe they're really trying to gun for a promotion, so they want a project that has all the glitz and glamour and will allow them to go on stage and collect an award, right? If you have an ability to do something like that to motivate people, even better. Some persons want projects that will offer them professional growth or insights into how to get professional growth. Some people just want something that has a tangible rewards. For instance, maybe you work a project on the side after work and you get some additional money. So some companies have systems where you can do your projects outside of working hours. And sometimes project teams choose to work after hours or they choose to work during lunch. And whoever completes the project can get maybe a monthly stipend or something. So based on who the person is, it will tell you what personality they have, what rewards they appreciate, and you will figure out how to deal with them. So there's a long list of them here on the textbook. You can go through. They're on page 197. And this is all in chapter 5, right? So there's lots of stuff here we can go through on motivating persons specifically. But I think one of the most important things that I have found specifically for motivating my teams and keeping them motivated is keeping them involved. So for instance, if I have a client that wants a major change on the project, as much as I can, I will never say, yes, we will definitely do that. I will say, you know what? I think we might be able to accommodate that. Let me double check with my team to make sure that our resources and our time schedule doesn't need to change, and I will get back to you. Even if that's my best client, I will do that. If they say, if I recognize that it's something more urgent and more touchy, I'm probably not going to say it outright like that. But I will definitely say, you know what, let me go double check some stuff and I will call you back in 1 hour and let you know. So you put a timestamp on that if it's somebody that's really, really important, and you let them know. You don't tell them that you got to go and ask your team for permission or any of that. And you're really not asking for permission. What you're doing is giving your team the respect to know, hey, I value your opinion. Our customer or client is asking for these changes. I feel like it's within our best interest to implement the changes. As your team as a project manager, your team will most likely listen to your suggestion. And if they agree, they'll go along with it. If they have comments, you might go back and forth a little bit. Be okay with that. Be okay with having discussions and conversations that don't lead to arguments, especially if you're looking for a solution that will affect the entire team, right? Something like extending the scope of your project or something like extending the time of your project. While you want to make that client as happy as possible, you need to keep your team motivated, because if your team isn't motivated and your team stops working, then what are you going to give to that client? Or do you want the client to get one buggy software and then they're not able to do all the things they needed to do, right? So reduce the bugs, reduce the stress, let your team know ahead, hey, they're asking for this, and I think we might be able to do it. How do you guys feel about that? Like, well, not guys, but how do you feel about that? You ask questions, you let them give you their opinions, and then you send off a response, and then you let them know, you confirm after that. Just so you guys know, I just followed up with the client, and the scope, the additional scope is approved. You follow up with them and you let them know, hey, we're going forward with whatever change. You confirm the change, right? Of course, at that point, if you're making a change to something, you have to document it. But recognizing how you make these changes, while I ended up getting into change again, like change theory again, I just really wanted to let you know that even as a project manager, even though you have the power to just change the project and sign off on things, I really don't feel like you should use that project without at least notifying your team members ahead of accepting it. Because if you accept it ahead and then your team comes back and says, look, we cannot do this, like whatever it is, maybe it falls outside of legal lines, maybe you didn't double check with somebody, maybe it forces your time to be more, or maybe it doubles your cost or something, what do you do then? Right? It's always easier to tell the client you will confirm in an hour than to call the client an hour back and say, listen, I just promised you something, but I changed my mind. That looks more professional than, can you give me 1 hour to double check? Right? Like, just let me run to my team, double check everything, that, it wouldn't change any of our milestones, and I'll be back. They will most likely prefer that over you then you coming back and say you made a mistake. Because if you made a mistake there, what other mistakes are you making? You don't want to raise those questions. So be respectful to everybody from ahead of time, know your steps, respect your team. Yeah. So those are some suggestions for handling newly built team. There are lots of other suggestions. When it comes to an outgoing team, there's certain things you do need to do. Like, we would always suggest that before you close off, you have meetings with your team members to let them know how you feel like they did in the project. You give everybody a personal vote of thanks. Then at the end of everything, you give everybody one large vote of thanks, and you let everybody know, everything was completed. You handed everything off to the client. Everything was signed. We have a cool down party later on this week, or just thanks for your work on this. Our project is now finished. Well, finished. What you're really looking to do as an outgoing team is to let everybody know that, thanks for your support. We're now done and we're ready to disband. But you don't just sharply disband. You have to find a way to soften that, because while you would have been managing their mental health, well, not managing, but while you would have been looking at these things from the outside, they would have also been building relationships within the team, and sometimes parasocial or social relationships in general. They get very deep. We really feel connected to the people that we spend a lot of time with. And if you spend a lot of time and you had this great experience with this team, you're going to carry some emotions from this project into your next project, right? So it's always great to stop and give a vote of thanks at the end of whatever project it is, and thank people for working with you. Now, if it's a system where you have a project that will close at the end of this iteration and you start back in 2 months or something, you don't have to do a whole ceremony to close it off, right? If it's a team that's going to be ongoing, you just continue to manage the relationship as you go apart and as you come back together. But every time you start, you always have that meeting at the beginning where you meet and you talk about everything that you guys want to do, how you want to do it. There is a word for that meeting. Like, what do you call the opening meeting? I really should know this. I am so ashamed of myself. I will double check and let you know what that meeting is called, but it's a meeting that we do at the beginning of the project, like an initiation meeting with the team where we let the team know what we're about to do. And then we also have one of those at the end of our, whenever we complete all of our deliverables, so that we can let everybody know that, hey, we are done with whatever we needed to do. I'm going to run this by the client and confirm with you that it's done. Once the client says it's done, you can end the project there and let them know, thanks guys, like, we're going to meet again for the next part of the project at whatever time or whatever. But if you have information on you guys going on to another process, definitely share some sort of timeline on that when you close this iteration or this cycle. And you let them know that, we do intend to meet with you again. Thanks for your time again, right? So as you look at this chapter, there are lots of other things that we talk about. So teams that engage in conflict, kickoff meeting. Thank you so much. Yes, it's a kickoff meeting. Yeah, so the textbook gives you some guide to deal with teams that have different complexes when it comes to dealing with conflict. So for instance, teams that fear conflict, they would suggest that you have boring meetings. What? Yeah, I don't believe this. Hold on. Tears of fear, conflict, ignore. Okay, let me go back up. What does this thing say? Ha ha ha. Okay, so yeah, what this textbook is doing here, they're listing actually the dysfunctions of a team, and so they're giving you the opposite of what you should do. Yeah, so weird. Anyways, yeah, so in the dysfunction of the team, they're showing you, like, for instance, if you have team members that fear conflict, having boring meetings is something that can possibly lead them into more conflict. If you have teams that want to engage in conflict, having lively discussions is probably something that's also going to lead them into conflict. So if you have a lively team that frequently engage in conflict, you might want to pull them aside and have conversations with the people that have conflict and then bring them back in together. So not exactly sure why they're going through dysfunctions of a team, but they do have some lists here for common dysfunctions that teams usually have. But then right below that, they have leadership in a project management environment. And there, they generally go through a lot of what I went through before. So they talk about the project environment and how the environment specifically leads to different behavior patterns. So for instance, if the area has a specific culture, you will generally find that your project has to function within that culture. You can't come with something very different and expect everybody to be okay working in that space right away. Um, but when we're talking about environment, it isn't just culture. We're also talking about the physical space that we have to deal with. We're talking about the time that we have to deal with going from branch to branch. We're talking about if the team is centralized, that is, we're all working in one building, or if we're decentralized, like for instance, courts that has a main office and then outside offices that have to find ways to communicate with each other and still operate as one company, right? So those are different things that will be in your project environment that will influence how you perform that project. And they have some examples of how to work around that. They have some text here on life cycle leadership. Now, that's really not something you need for this specific course, but there is a space that they talk about organizational impacts directly, and they go through a few examples of that. I'm not going to go through it in class because I've talked about it before in the first part of this class, but they give specific examples of how to the impacts on like employee performance, how different things can affect performance, how different things can affect your problem solving abilities or how we can problem solve. So you guys can take a look at that. And then they have some employee manager problems. So employee management problems, they will often come into play where you have a project team that is also part of different function that are also parts of different functional teams. Like the company doesn't have a dedicated project office. So what you find happening is if I want this employee to work on my project for all of today because we're running behind, their functional manager at their day job, their actual job at this company might get upset because they might need them for maybe reporting or project season is coming up and they have not been done their report because they're busy working on my project. So in that space, that employee might end up having conflict with their functional manager. So it really shouldn't be something they have to deal with in their functional manager. If you need them for additional time beyond what they had agreed to or beyond what you had agreed to with their manager, you should have been the person to take the initiative to go to their manager to okay that additional time rather than leaving the responsibility and threat of that on their job on them, right? Because it's more difficult for them to say, hey, I need additional time for somebody else's project than for you as the project manager to say, hey, I need your team member for some additional time. It's more difficult for the manager to tell you no than the employee. And you're possibly putting that employee's job in jeopardy. That's not something we want. And how those things will be governed will be based on things like the span of control. And your span of control are all of the things that are within each employee's control. So as the functional manager, they have control over what the employee does when they sit at their job in their regular space. Maybe the time is agreed on in the project contract, maybe it is not. But the span of control of the project manager only applies to the project. You cannot influence how that person does their day job, right? If the person does all the reports for you in Times New Roman, and you don't want that, you want Calibri, you can only ask them to do Calibri writing or use Calibri text in the documents they produce for the project. You cannot ask them to use Calibri text in the documents that they produce for their day job, for their functional manager. It's the functional manager's place to change that and not you. So that is just an example of how span of control kind of specifically works, but you can read into some more text on span of control. But it's really just what things can each person influence based on their job role. Yeah. So they've got those, they've got a few management pitfalls, some communication issues that we find happening often in teams. They go through those a lot. Now, when it comes to communication, the ones that I do want to touch on is the exchange of information. I don't know how many of you would have done this exercise, but there's an exercise that I would have done very early in school where the first person in the class, closest to the teacher, was given a message. This message was passed through every single student in the class, and by the time it gets to the last person, it's so outrageous. It's so far and so different from what the teacher said, right? We know part of it is going to be because kids will be kids and we're going to tell each other madness. But part of it really is that people hear things differently, people interpret things differently, and you might give me a 3-word sentence and I might use 7 or 8 adjectives to say the same thing to the next person. Who knows how it changes, right? But what you send might not be what the person has received, so you've got to manage the method in which you communicate. If it's something that is very, very, very urgent or important, you want to make sure that if you're going to send it in an email, you very clearly at the top of that email state what it is that is so urgent, and that you make sure that the subject of that email has something pointing to the fact that it's urgent. If you're working on Microsoft Office, like Microsoft Outlook, you have the ability to put that little the exclamation mark to go with your email to let persons know that it's urgent. If you're sending an email with Gmail, you might want to write the word urgent there in the subject, right? So based on how you're communicating or where you're communicating, it will depend on how you specifically state your problem. But when you're exchanging information, you need to make sure that what you send is what you intend to send, or what the person hears and receives is what you intend to see. If it's something that you know that you're going to meet the person and you're able to give them additional context, maybe you're talking in person, you can be a lot more general in what you say. And you might not have to write down what you're saying, versus if you only have 1 minute to pass a message, you might want to give them the synopsis of what you're saying in person or verbally, and then write the rest of instructions that you have down. If you don't have instructions and you want them to use their initiative, please say that. But when it comes to communication, I think outside of thinking about what you want to say, it's also important to read your message back in a way that that person that's receiving it might get it, right? So how we say things is pretty much just as important as when we say it or why we've said it. Yeah, so communication styles is something we need to manage. There are times when the style that we choose might not be the style we want to stick with, but that is something that we have to figure out through trial and error, or by just asking somebody what their preferences are. Yeah, I think at this point we have again covered everything we needed to cover. I'm going to continue going through this information to look for anything else that I might want to touch on with you all tonight. But the same skills that the project manager needs, which are those skills of negotiation, the skills of mentorship, the skills of counseling, skills of facilitation, skills of conflict management, presentation skills, communication skills, while these are very, very important skills for the project manager, well, actually, these are vital skills for the project manager to have, it's also important that at least one other member of your team has each of these skills, because there are times if that somebody else is going to have to fill in for that project manager, right? People are people and things happen. So we always want to make sure that somebody else can fall in line if somebody else falls out of line. But in general, these are generally skills that are very good for you to have, regardless of which setting or which position you find yourself in on a team, right? So while this is the end of what we needed to cover today, I do want to talk a little bit about something that we call stress and burnout. Now, I want to touch on stress and burnout because I find that in our culture, I don't know if it is that we are generally a stressed population, or if we are a population that has had to deal with so many challenges that we are going through, so many stresses, we aren't able to identify what is a stressor or what is burnout anymore. But I do recognize it a lot in people that I talk to. So a lot of my friends and so forth, by the time we finish UG and we've gone 1 or 2 years into our career, we're a bit burnt out. Why? Because you finish UG, you want to prove yourself at work, and you put everything into your job for those first couple of years. Sometimes because you knew you will make mistakes, things will happen, and your confidence will start to get beaten down. And as your confidence gets beaten down, you start to grow some resentment, both at your job, both the people both with your job and with the people you work with. But thirdly, also with yourself sometimes, right? You feel that disappointment within yourself. It's very important for you to step aside and take a break. And that works for whether you're a team member or a team manager, because everybody will experience stress at some point in their life. And if you allow your stresses to compound and you don't manage it with all the other things happening in that project and happening in your personal life, it could lead to burnout. And a burnt out project manager at the middle of your project is the worst thing that can happen, because if your project manager isn't able to function, it directly affects the ability for the rest of the team to function, right? Because who is managing everyone, giving orders and making sure that we stay streamlined if your project manager is just over it? If they aren't checking in anymore, how do you get the project checked in, right? So managing stress as soon as you start to see it is important. But I do want to stop on the topic here because when you're at university, I do notice that you guys, well, I keep saying guys, but please understand, I don't mean men. I just mean people, right? When I'm talking about stress, I do recognize that you all would have most likely done your first semester. You would have also most likely done your second semester, and you guys are you currently enrolled in a third semester, aka summer course. That is a lot of work for 1 year. I hope that at the end of this, regardless of how you all functioned in your exams last semester or how you function in this class, I don't expect any failures from this class. But with all of this, I do also recognize that you all have personal lives, and I hope that you're giving yourself space to breathe as you go through all of this and as you continue to go through UG. That's why I stopped to touch on stress and burnout. I am checking in with my class. It's why I check in with you at the end of any of my long talking sessions, because I want to make sure that I'm not stressing you out and that you don't end up burnt out in the middle of the course. That's why I stop, I ask questions, I give you a chance to let me reinforce. If it's too much for you, I also put the recordings up so that you can check that. I also point sometimes to, well, you have your textbook, but sometimes I point to specific pages in the textbook so that you have those references to go back to. I suggested you write notes. If you write notes, you can find it faster in the textbook. If you can find it faster in the textbook, you listen to less of the lecture, of the recordings. If you come to the class, you don't even have to listen to the recordings. But all of these different things are things that you can do to manage your stress and therefore to ensure that you don't end up burnt out, because it's a lot easier to manage stress than it is to come back from burnout, right? So that's just one thing I wanted to touch on, and we can continue. So in chapter 7, the entirety of chapter 7 deals with conflict. Why is there an entire chapter on conflict? Because lots of conflicts happen in projects, and further, lots of conflicts happen on teams. Please understand, I expect you all to have conflict. You have to work together to come up with a team name to put on your team contract. I'm sure you would have disagreed at some point on 2 names, right? So just the same way you're able to respect each other and get through that happily at the beginning of the course, I expect you to continuously work on respectfully voicing your opinions within your teams. And if you find that at any point in time, control of conflict is slipping out of your hands, reach out to me right away and I can help you with that. Yeah, because if you have team splitting apart at the end of the course, it's going to be a lot of people doing individual papers, and that's going to be a lot more work on you. I don't want that, so let's manage conflict as we go through. There's an entire chapter here on managing conflict. They give you the objectives of managing conflicts. We do it because we want to make sure that when we want to understand why conflicts might occur, we want to understand how we might be able to resolve conflicts. We want to recognize which objectives might cause conflict within your team. When you're managing conflicts, the things that you think about is what are specific issues, right? Is the conflict something that's complex? Is it not complex? Is it something that's measurable or verifiable? Right? What are you having the conflict about? Is it something like, is the result achievable? Is it realistic? Why are you arguing about it if it's not realistic? Right? Let's dial our opinions back and look for a solution that works for everyone. So when we're setting goals, that's usually what defines what we're going to make a conflict and what we aren't, right? So when we're setting our goals for the project, we have to make sure our goals are objectives. We want to make sure that they are SMART goals. SMART goals is something that started coming about in management philosophy maybe 10-ish years ago. And for SMART goals, we use them a lot in spaces where we manage people. So for instance, you find it a lot in HR. You find it a lot in marketing also. Well, a lot in PR, not really marketing. But when we're setting goals, what we're looking to do is make sure that they are S for specific, M for measurable, A for attainable, R for realistic or relevant, and T for tangible or time bound. So S, what is the goal? What are we doing this for? Specify. Okay, how do we measure it? Yes, you want us to write a project, right? But what is the project? Okay, fine, it's a project proposal. Project proposals usually have these 5 sections in it, so we can measure it by the project having all 5 sections. How do we say that each section is attained? Right? What needs to be in each section? You will have one, for instance, I've already sent you guys what I expect your final project to look like. So in that, you will see that in each section, I also pointed out what needs to be attained within each section of your paper. Further, the goals that you set for yourself, are they realistic? Is it something that can actually be achieved? Is it something that's relevant to what we're looking to do? Because if the project isn't relevant, why are we doing it? Why are we putting time on projects that are not relevant, right? And then, is it tangible, right? Is it time bound? How much time do we have, right? If it's a project, it means that yes, it is time bound. So how much time do we have? So those are how we set our SMART goals. And remember, SMART goal isn't a theory that is inherent. Well, not inherent. It's not a theory that is specific to project management. It's a theory that is specific to any area in which we are doing any sort of goal setting. The next thing we look at is the environment in which conflicts can happen. So conflicts conflicts generally involve things like manpower and resources. So how do we manage those? Equipment and facilities, who can use what at what time? Capital expenditure, big one, right? How much money do we have to start up this project, and where do we put the money that we have? When it comes to cost, how do we manage the costs, right? Do we buy the part that has the best quality, or do we buy the part that has the best cost or is most cost efficient, right? Then we can also look at well, the other thing that also causes a lot of conflict is in the technical operations, the technical options and trade-offs. So should we do this or should we do that? Oftentimes, there's at least one person in the team that's going to want to go in the opposite direction, right? So we're going to have to manage that as a conflict. So it can be a situation where we say that the consensus rules, like the majority of persons that have chosen one thing, that they win the vote. Or it can be a case where we talk to that one person that disagrees until they agree and we move forward together, right? But the most important thing really is always going to be, what is the priority, right? What is the priority of the conflict? Okay, so we're arguing over what color we should paint the wall. What is the room for? If the room is a room for children, sure, paint it a bright color. If it's a room for adults to work, you might want to dim the color down a tiny bit, right? So when you're looking at priorities, you have to go back to the mission and vision of the company. What is this project for? What is the root of all of this? Why are we doing this? When we remember our whys, then we can prioritize accordingly. So this entire chapter 7 that goes through conflict, I'm not gonna go through any more of conflict because I've touched on all of these topics as we've gone through the course. So I'm gonna stop here and I'm gonna ask if anybody has any questions before we move on to the rest of the class. Like, does anybody have any questions when it comes to the interpersonal things that we consider or the human factors that we consider when working on teams, or in the way we manage conflict and people? All right, so I get no questions. And I think I'm pretty much gonna stop here for tonight, so that you all have a chance to kind of just think about what I said. I do recognize that we are already at 8:17. I don't want to take you all too late, so I'm gonna stop here. Not gonna provide any more new information, but I do have to look at the team that we have, right? So, questions. What questions do we have? Does anybody have a question? I hope somebody has at least one question that we can kind of think of critically before we wrap up.
Miss, I'm trying to type a question, but the chat is turned off.
It is? Okay, well, tell me what the question is.
I wasn't being able to attend the first two classes because I have a clash with business policies and strategies. So which means I barely have any knowledge on what the first two classes is. Can you be able to tell me when actually is our first assessment?
So your first assessment was like 2 days ago. Or no, it was yesterday. So here's what's happening right now. You know what? I'm gonna discuss that after, because I do like, that's really just going over the projects. So I'm gonna do that in 1 minute, and then at the end of going through the project, I will go through I will go through putting persons that do not have teams into teams, and then we'll end the class. But I see Tanika, you have your hands up. Do you have a question?
Hi. Last week I came to the Wednesday class as well, and you told us we only have to come to one class per week, but you are going to get that sorted out. Do we have to now come to both, or is it still just one?
Yeah, we have to come to both. Did you come to class on Monday?
No, I didn't.
Okay, well, it's okay. I already uploaded the video for Monday. It's just 1 hour, so it's already up. I put it up on YouTube.
Okay, great. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, do we have any questions on the lecture today? Anything anybody wants to clarify? Or does anybody have any notes on anything new that they learned? Stephanie?
Hi, good night, Miss. Can you please explain what is required for the contract draft? I joined class a bit late. I'm not sure if you did explain before.
Oh, no problem. I'm gonna explain that right after. Like, it's the same question that was asked before, that Verona asked. So I'll go over that in 1 minute. I just want to ask if there are any questions related specifically to class today. No? All right. So you have 2 assignments currently. So all of them are a part of one bigger assignment. So essentially what you need to do for this course is you have to write 1 research paper, but I've turned that research paper into a project. So everything that we do in this course, where we have to go about creating our different charts for our work breakdown structure, we have to create Gantt charts, etc. I'm going to have you schedule how you put time into writing the project. For instance, we will literally have when you're going to start doing your literature review, when you're going to start doing your research, when you're going to start writing your first draft, when you're going to start writing your second draft, etc. So because I want you to write your research paper as a project, I'm telling you that research paper can be of any topic of your choosing. Within groups, you have to choose a topic that everybody is comfortable with. If it's something that you want to use to get ahead on another project that you have, feel free to use the research paper as something you can use as an outlet for that. But the topic for your research paper is dependent on what you want. The outline for how the paper needs to be written is already uploaded. So that's one thing. That's your major project that we need to do. That's due at the end of the semester. The planning documents for that project, right? That's what project management allows us to do in our project planning phase. Currently, we're going through initiation and we're now starting to plan. In project planning, we have some documents that we have to create. I mentioned them before. Your Gantt chart is going to be your PERT chart. It's going to be your work breakdown structure. It's going to be your risk matrix. All of these documents we're going to go through as the class goes on. But you're going to have to upload all of those into your group folders. Now, you're doing all of those as a group, including the research paper. What you have done so far are 2 of your documents. The first document was the charter. The project charter is the first document that is done to start a project. It is a client requesting something to be done or a project to be done by a team. So I am the person requesting it from you. So I have created my charter and I've sent it off. I put the draft in Moodle, and I want you all to go on, download that, sign it within your teams, and submit it to the folder. Now it's there because I want you to first be able to understand how to work within the team when it comes to downloading files, signing files, uploading files again. I just want you to basically create a folder for project management with that first document and learn how to sign documents if you haven't signed documents virtually before and uploaded it and worked collaboratively on a document. The second thing is your project contract. Your project contract is your team members agreeing on how you're going to operate within your group. When you want to have meetings, if you want to have meetings only within class, or if you guys want to have meetings Friday nights. whenever you want to have a meeting, you can literally state that on your contract. Your contract will also have to state what is your group name. Your assignment in the last class was to come up with a group name that you think portrays your project well, and you're gonna put that group name on your team contract. In your team contract, you will also have your rules for how, for who you chose. You also provide me who you chose as your project leader, your project manager, but you also have to tell me how you intend to manage conflict, etc. within the document. Those are your clauses. I've outlined the general clauses that you have on team contracts, and I uploaded them already in the outline for that document. So just read that and it will tell you how to create that. So for the charter, essentially just sign and submit. For your team contract, you have to learn to collaborate on typing up one document, signing it, and then submitting it. That's everything that's all the assignments that you have to do so far. Do we have any questions on the assignment? Tanika, your hands are up just now.
Yeah, sorry. I seem to get a little confused. You're saying the charter that you uploaded, that's the one we need to download and sign and re-upload?
Yeah, just download, sign, and submit. That's me requesting that you do a project. And then you doing the contract and sending that to me is you responding to say, yes, we can complete all of these things in this way.
Okay, so weren't we supposed to create our own charter?
No, you sign the charter that I sent. You have to create your contract.
Oh my gosh, okay. Thank you.
It's okay. It's okay.
We actually created an entire charter. Okay, I'll do that.
Congrats.
Thank
Now
you.
you know how. It's okay. If you want to upload that for fun, you can upload it and I can take a look at what you did so I can make sure that you have the idea of how to do a charter.
Okay, we actually did. You can take a look, but I'll have my other team member upload the one that we signed.
Yeah, that's okay. All right, so currently you guys have to submit your charter for those of you who are new to the class, and then your contract. So both of these for you right now, they're due on Sunday. Beyond on Sunday, I'm gonna go through and mark everything that everybody has. Beyond that, you are always allowed to update your team contract. Your team contract can be updated at any point throughout the semester. And it also in real life projects, they're pretty much also updated throughout the project if needs be. If somebody leaves the team or they no longer wish to work on the team, with the team, or they want to work in a separate capacity, they want to do something different, team contracts change. So in that same spirit, you're all allowed to update that contract throughout the semester. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on our work breakdown structure. So you can start thinking about what is a work breakdown structure, because that's what we're doing in our next class. Our next class, we're actually going to do one. Usually I like to have an activity in the second half of the class. Today we had a lot of talking to do, so I didn't. But in our next class, half of it is going to be us creating our work breakdown structure. And then the very next class, we're creating our Gantt chart. So I want to give you the space to do it in class so that I can answer questions as you do it. You will, of course, always have to upload after the class. You'll get like 1 day to fix it up and upload it. But even with those documents, you will still have until the end of the semester to submit a final draft. I will still allow you to update those as we go along, right? So it does not have to be perfect on the very first day. What you should have before you come to class again next week is I should have contracts for everybody that has a team name for everyone, right? Not everybody in the individual, like not every individual in the team, but each team should have a name. So when I come next week, if you're team motivation, I will call on you as team motivation instead of group 1, group 2, group 3, right? So we're creating team names. Then I should have whatever topic you intend to study as your paper. That should be on the team contract. That can also change throughout the semester. I don't expect you to, I don't expect every single team to get it right the first time when it comes to picking a team, a project title, because it can be a bit difficult to choose topics, especially when you don't know what information is available ahead of time. So whatever you put there, it's okay if you change it. I just need to see which direction you're going in so that I can guide you to your finish line. So for now, just work on submitting the charter to me, and creating your team contract and uploading both of those documents by next week Sunday. By this Sunday, sorry. The last thing I need to do today in class is I need to create the last set of teams. So I have some persons that came in today. Is there anybody here that is not in a team? Show of hands, everybody one time that is not on a team, and I will go through and put you all in teams. Akeem, I have you already. You're in a team. Do you have a question? Alicia Bagot, are you? Okay, no question. Great. Alicia, you're not in the team?
Good evening, Miss. No, Miss.
You're not? All right. So Alicia, I have someone that reached out to me earlier, Asaf, ASAPH. Oh, you're here, Asaf. You have your hands up. So Asaf and Alicia, you two are gonna work together. I'm going to, since I'm assuming you're new to the class, the WhatsApp link was shared earlier. I don't know if it's still there, if you can see it. So I'm going to share it again so that you both can join and exchange contact information. Oh, Celine, are you putting in the... Perfect. If you are gonna put it in, I don't have to, because I was just trying to like copy and paste it. Like it copied weird for me. Yeah, so Selena's gonna put that. For the persons who are new to the class, I explained generally what your assignment looks like right now. Is there any part of that explanation that is a bit confusing? I do know that it might be. Like, if it's confusing, let me know if there's any part specifically that you're confused about. I do have like breakdowns in Moodle that specifically says what you need to have in each one, but I do know that some of you do not have access to Moodle as yet, right? So is there anybody that needs further clarification on the documents that need to be submitted this weekend?
Miss, not clarification, but I see that the it's no longer showing up for on my end to make a submission for the charter, but I'm seeing the contract is due on the 13th.
Oh, so it closed? That's weird.
Yeah, the charter stuff, it was due on the 11th and it closed. So it's just the project alone showing up, and it's showing up for tomorrow.
No problem. I'm gonna update that. I'm going into it right now and update that. Yeah, so let me make a note just in case I hop out of this. I'm gonna go in and update the settings now. It really should have allowed you to continue submitting. Not sure why it did that, but I'll fix it. All right. So do we have any other questions? Miss, can you please let me know which group you're in?
I'm sorry, Miss. Before we move on, it's Candice that spoke to you earlier when the class started. Just reminding you that
you and Pivita?
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
All right, Akeem. So Akeem, you are working with Carissa. Is it Carissa? What did I write? So you're working. Miss. Okay. Oh, perfect. Carissa and Sylvester. Oh, I usually see it with an SY. That's why. Hello, Sylvester. So that's who you're working with, Akeem. Just so you all know, again, when I create the groups, you're able to have a group chat right here on Moodle. But I know lots of you guys don't like to use Moodle, so if you do, it's there for you. I'll upload today's class by, I would say by tomorrow, I should be able to sit and cut out the break or anything else. I don't know if I'm gonna leave the end. Do you guys want me to leave the end of the class in, like this discussion part here where we said the rest of the groups, or should I just omit this whole part where I explain the assignments again? Especially the persons who are new. Do you want me to keep this part or not? Leave it? All right, we're gonna leave it. No problem. All right, so I don't want to take up any more of your time. Guys, go get some rest. Yeah, don't try to do any more work tonight. It's already 8:34. Y'all should be heading into night time. So everything that we've done today that I've explained with you is pretty much everything you need to understand about this. I don't usually explain it in a way that you need to do that much additional reading. But I would suggest that you do look at those specific areas that I talked about if you want to get some additional information on specific things like conflict or so as those things come up. So when you're ready to deal with those topics, if you find you need some additional help dealing with it, consult your textbook, but the majority of what you'll be tested on what we've gone through is explained. And the same goes for the previous classes, right? A lot of what you need to know, I have already told you. So you don't have to go reading a whole lot of the textbooks. But if you find that there is one topic that you are not clear about, please, please, please do some additional research on that one topic. If you find that you're not finding the answer is the same way or you want to clarify something with me, reach out. First word. Don't question it. Just reach out. Right? So good night. Have a good rest of your night. I will see you all next week. Asaf, do you have a question? I see 2 hands up. Or I don't see them up anymore. All right. Have a good night.
Good night, miss.
Bye. Bye, Serena, Celine, Varuna. Okay. So we're